All right, everyone, strap in. Today, we're diving headfirst into Mustafa Suleyman's The Coming Wave.
Oh, yeah. This one's a doozy.
From what I've gathered, it's all about how AI and synthetic biology are about to, well, completely reshape our world.
That's putting it mildly.
And not necessarily for the better.
Right. Suleyman doesn't sugarcoat anything.
I mean, this is the guy who co-founded DeepMind, the AI powerhouse behind AlphaGo, so he's not just some tech doomsday prophet.
Exactly. He's been on the front lines of this stuff.
So he's seen firsthand just how fast AI is developing.
And he's arguing that we're on the verge of this, well, he calls it a coming wave.
Coming wave, huh? Okay, that sounds pretty dramatic.
It is. He's basically saying this wave of tech could be as transformative as, like, the agricultural or industrial revolutions.
Well, okay, so not just another tech upgrade, but a total societal upheaval.
Exactly. A fundamental shift in, well, everything.
So, help me out here. What exactly is this coming wave? Should I be building a bunker?
Not quite. He's using wave as a metaphor, right? To describe how these clusters of technologies emerge and kind of feed off each other.
Like a chain reaction. One breakthrough leads to another, and suddenly the world's a completely different place.
Exactly. And the ripple effects are, well, pretty much impossible to predict.
Okay, so far so good. But hasn't technology always advanced in waves? I mean, we went from horses and buggies to cars to airplanes.
Yeah, but this time it's different.
What makes this wave so different? So, I guess, potentially dangerous.
It's the sheer power and the speed at which these technologies are developing, especially AI and synthetic biology.
Right, those seem to be the big ones everyone's talking about.
They're game changers, no doubt.
But why are they so dangerous? Is it like the robots taking over scenario?
Well, he touches on that, but his main concern is what he calls the containment problem.
Containment problem. Okay, lay that on me.
Basically, technology has this inherent tendency to spread rapidly.
Right, goes viral, you might say.
And to have these unintended, often totally unpredictable consequences.
Okay, so we create these powerful tools, and then they kind of take on a life of their own.
Exactly. And we're not always very good at anticipating or controlling those consequences.
So, to sum it up, we've got this coming wave.
This massive technological shift driven by AI and synthetic biology.
We've got the containment problem.
The fact that technology tends to, well, escape our control.
And I'm guessing a whole lot of potential for things to go sideways.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from that.
So where do we even begin to unpack all of this? What's the game plan for this deep dive?
Well, Suleyman starts by, believe it or not, looking back.
Back, like, into history.
Yeah, he dives deep into past examples of technological waves.
To see what we can learn from them. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Exactly. He wants to show us how these waves have played out before.
Smart. So which historical example does he focus on? What's the poster child for technological disruption?
The internal combustion engine and the rise of the automobile.
The car. Really? Seems kind of obvious.
But think about it. Cars completely transformed everything.
I mean, yeah, transportation, obviously.
But also urban planning, our relationship with the environment, even how we think about freedom and mobility.
Yeah, true. The car changed the world, that's for sure.
He uses it as a prime example of how a technological wave can, well, reshape society from the ground up.
Okay, but wasn't everyone super excited about cars?
Mm.
I mean, who wouldn't want to ditch the horse and buggy?
Actually, he points out that there was plenty of pushback.
Really? People resisting the car. Who were these Luddites?
Well, he talks about the actual Luddites, for one.
Those textile workers in England who smashed the machines.
Exactly. They saw those machines as a threat to their jobs, their livelihoods.
Understandable, I guess. But smashing things doesn't usually solve the problem.
Nope, and he also talks about Japan.
Japan. What did they do?
They basically shut themselves off from the outside world for centuries.
Trying to avoid the disruption that new tech could bring.
Exactly. They wanted to preserve their traditional way of life.
So basically, people have always had this love-hate relationship with technology.
Embrace the shiny new toys, but also fear the consequences.
Right, it's like a double-edged sword.
Powerful, but potentially dangerous.
And, spoiler alert, trying to stop progress usually doesn't work out so well, does it?
He makes that very clear. Attempts to resist technological change almost always fail.
So, we can't stop the wave, but maybe we can learn to surf it.
That's the question, right? Are we just helpless bystanders?
Or can we somehow steer this thing in a direction that benefits humanity?
And that's where Suleyman's argument gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, what's his take? Can we control this coming wave?
He believes that we need to find a way to harness the power of these technologies without letting them spin out of control.
Sounds like a tightrope walk.
He calls it finding a narrow path between, unbridled technological advancement and, well, potentially catastrophic outcomes.
A narrow path. Okay, that sounds pretty precarious.
It is. There's not a lot of room for error.
So how do we even find this path? Where do we start?
He suggests we start by taking a hard look at the specific technologies driving this wave, AI and synthetic biology.
Okay, makes sense. Understand the beast before you try to tame it, right?
We need to understand their potential, their limits, and the unique risks they pose.
So let's dive into the deep end and start with AI.
Everyone's favorite tech boogeyman these days.
Right. Killer robots, sentient machines, the whole 9 yards.
He definitely doesn't downplay the potential dangers of AI.
But is he saying AI is all bad? I mean, surely there are some good applications too, right?
Absolutely. He's not anti-AI at all.
Okay, good, because I'm kind of attached to my smartphone.
But he's urging us to be realistic about the risks
To proceed with caution, basically.
and to think really carefully about how we develop and deploy these technologies.
Not just unleash them on the world and hope for the best.
Right, because the stakes are incredibly high.
So it's not about ditching AI altogether, but about finding that narrow path.
That sweet spot between harnessing its power and, avoiding the potential pitfalls.
Avoiding a robot apocalypse, basically.
That's one way to put it.
Okay, so we need to be smart about AI. Got it.
He spends a good chunk of the book exploring the really rapid advancements in AI,
And I'm guessing he focuses on those large language models, the ones that are all over the news these days.
like GPT-3 and Lambda. Yeah, the ones that can basically hold conversations like a human.
The ones they have everyone freaking out about,
Yeah,
like robots becoming sentient and deciding they don't need us anymore.
he does touch on the whole sentience debate, but honestly, he's more concerned about the immediate risks.
The here and now dangers of AI, the stuff that's already happening.
Exactly, the stuff we need to be paying attention to right now.
Okay, so give me the rundown. What are these immediate AI risks? What should I be losing sleep over?
He highlights a few key areas. One of the biggest is the spread of misinformation.
Right, with these AI models getting so good at generating text, it's getting harder and harder to distinguish what's real and what's fake.
And that has huge implications for, well, everything, really. Democracy, trust, our shared sense of reality.
It's like, how do you even have a functioning society when you can't tell what's true anymore?
That's the question, isn't it?
And then there's the whole deepfake thing, which is already messing with our heads.
That's just the tip of the iceberg, unfortunately.
Okay, so misinformation, check. What else is on his AI worry list?
Bias in algorithms is another big one.
Right, if these AI systems are trained on biased data, they'll just perpetuate and amplify existing inequalities.
And that can have real-world consequences in areas like hiring, lending, even criminal justice.
Yeah, scary stuff. And then, of course, there's the job displacement issue.
The one everyone's talking about.
AI automating more and more tasks, potentially putting millions of people out of work.
It's a valid concern and one we need to address head-on.
Okay, so we've got misinformation, bias, job losses. Not exactly a rosy picture.
But he's not saying AI is all doom and gloom.
Okay, good, because I was starting to get a little depressed.
He actually believes that AI has the potential to, solve some of humanity's biggest challenges.
Like climate change, disease, poverty.
Exactly, but we need to be smart about it.
Not just let AI run wild, but actively guide its development and use it for good.
Exactly, and that's the challenge, isn't it? Finding that balance.
That narrow path between the potential benefits and the very real dangers.
And to do that, we need to understand both sides of the equation.
Okay, I'm with you so far. We've covered AI, but Suleyman pairs it with another potentially world-changing technology, synthetic biology.
Yeah, that's where things get really wild.
What's the deal with that? Is he talking designer babies and Jurassic Park scenarios?
Not dinosaurs just yet, but he describes synthetic biology as essentially rewriting the code of life.
Rewriting the code of life. Okay, that sounds ambitious.
It is. Think gene editing with CRISPR, designing new organisms from scratch.
Designing organisms from scratch, like creating entirely new life forms.
Potentially even bringing back extinct species, like the woolly mammoth.
Whoa, hold up, bringing back extinct species. Okay, now that's getting into sci-fi territory.
He argues that synthetic biology has the potential to revolutionize everything from medicine and agriculture to, environmental cleanup.
I can see how that could be, well, incredibly beneficial.
Imagine engineering crops that can thrive in droughts, creating personalized gene therapies to cure diseases, even using microbes to clean up oil spills.
Yeah, okay, I see the appeal, but it also sounds kind of, well, risky.
The potential is enormous, but so are the risks, no doubt about it.
So we've got these two incredibly powerful technologies, AI and synthetic biology, and they're both developing at this breakneck speed with all sorts of unpredictable consequences.
And here's the kicker, they're not developing in isolation.
Meaning,
They're starting to influence and accelerate each other.
okay, how so? Give me an example.
Well, AI is already being used to design new proteins and predict how they'll fold.
And why is that important?
It has huge implications for drug development and our understanding of biology in general.
So AI is speeding up advances in synthetic biology.
Exactly. And as AI gets more sophisticated, it can be used to design even more complex biological systems.
Whoa, it's like this feedback loop, each technology pushing the other forward at an exponential rate.
And that's what makes this wave so different, so potentially disruptive.
Okay, my head's spinning a little, but I think I'm starting to get it. So we've got AI, we've got synthetic biology, they're converging, amplifying each other's impact.
And they're both developing at this, well, unprecedented speed.
But why now? Why this sudden explosion of technological development? Why is all this happening all at once?
That's where Suleyman gets into the driving forces behind this wave, the things that are making it almost impossible to stop.
The gas pedal, so to speak.
He calls them unstoppable incentives.
Unstoppable incentive. Okay, I'm all ears. Break it down for me.
He identifies four key drivers. The first, and this is a classic one, is geopolitical competition,
Right, no one wants to be left behind in the tech race.
especially when it comes to technologies that could, give a country a military or economic edge.
It's like the arms race, but for AI and synthetic biology.
Exactly. And he uses the example of Sputnik, the Soviet satellite that kicked off the space race.
Right, one breakthrough can completely shift the balance of power and trigger a whole wave of innovation.
And I'm guessing the US and China are the major players in this new tech race. He definitely calls out China's push for dominance in AI. They're investing heavily in research, and they've made it clear they want to be the global leader.
Okay, so we've got nations jockeying for position, but it's not just governments driving this wave, is it?
No, he also points to the research ecosystem itself.
You mean scientists and academics?
Exactly. There's this inherent drive to publish, to share knowledge, to push the boundaries of what's possible.
Which makes sense. Scientists are curious by nature. They want to make discoveries.
But that drive, that curiosity, can sometimes lead us down some dangerous paths.
Right, like opening Pandora's box.
And that's the tension he highlights. This drive for knowledge can make it really hard to contain technology.
Once an idea is out there, it's out there, right? You can't just stuff it back in the bottle.
Exactly. Think about open source software or all the research that's published online. It's almost impossible to control the flow of information.
Okay, so we've got geopolitics, the research ecosystem. What else is fueling this coming wave?
Well, we can't forget about good old-fashioned profit motive.
Ah, yes. Money makes the world go round.
He points out that there are massive financial incentives for companies to develop and deploy these new technologies.
And when there's money to be made, well, things tend to move fast.
Exactly. And he even uses the phrase, the $100 trillion opportunity, to describe the potential economic impact of this wave.
Wow, $100 trillion. Okay, now I see why everyone's jumping on the bandwagon.
When you have that kind of money pouring into research and development, it's going to create a powerful force for innovation.
But it also raises some big questions about, who benefits and who gets left behind.
Exactly. And who ultimately controls these technologies?
Okay, so we've got geopolitics, the research ecosystem, the profit motive, anything else driving this coming wave.
He adds one more, and it might surprise you. Ego.
Ego. You mean like people's desire to be seen as innovators, the ones who change the world.
Exactly. He argues that this desire for recognition, for impact, plays a big role in driving people to push the boundaries.
And sometimes that ambition can blind us to the potential downsides.
Right, we get so caught up in the excitement of the new that we don't always stop to think about the consequences.
Okay, so we've got these four powerful forces: geopolitics, research, profit, and ego, all pushing this way forward, making it almost impossible to contain.
It's a perfect storm, and it's picking up speed.
So are we just doomed? Is there any hope of steering this thing in a positive direction?
Well, that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive, when we look at what Suleyman calls states of failure.
States of failure. Okay, now I'm really worried.
Don't worry, we'll get to the solutions eventually, but first, we need to understand the risks, the potential ways in which this wave could, well, go very wrong.
Okay, I guess I can handle a little more doom and gloom, but I'm holding out for that glimmer of hope.
We'll get there, I promise. But first, Let's dive into the dark side of the coming wave.
All right, lead the way. I'm right behind you. All right, so things are looking a little grim, to say the least.
Yeah, not exactly a walk in the park.
We've got this coming wave of powerful technology bearing down on us, driven by these unstoppable incentives. And the potential consequences, those states of failure you mentioned, are, well, pretty terrifying.
Suleyman doesn't sugarcoat it, that's for sure.
So are we just doomed? Is there any way to navigate this thing without getting completely wiped out?
He doesn't think so. He believes there's still a chance, a way to steer this wave in a direction that, benefits humanity rather than destroys us.
Okay, I'm clinging to that shred of hope.
hmm
So what's the plan? How do we avoid getting crushed by this coming wave?
He argues for a multi-pronged approach.
Multi-pronged, huh? Sounds complicated.
It is. It's a global strategy, really.
Yeah.
One that addresses not just the technology itself, but also the cultural and political dimensions of this challenge.
Okay, so it's not just about tweaking the algorithms or writing better code
It's about changing the way we think about technology.
and how we use it.
Exactly, and he spends a whole chapter debunking this idea that regulation alone can solve the problem.
Right, because slapping on some rules and calling it a day probably isn't going to cut it, is it?
Not even close. We need a more fundamental shift.
Okay, so what does this multi-pronged approach look like? Give me the details.
He outlines a framework that focuses on three key areas: technical safety, a cultural shift within the tech industry itself, and this one's crucial popular engagement.
Okay, let's break that down, starting with technical safety.
Basically, it's about making sure these technologies are, safe by design.
Safe by design, I like that, so it's not just an afterthought, but baked into the development process from the very beginning.
Exactly. And he argues that we need to invest way more heavily in research that focuses specifically on the safety and security of AI and synthetic biology.
So not just focusing on making these technologies more powerful, but also making them more secure.
Right. He talks about things like red teaming, where you have teams of experts actively trying to break AI systems to identify vulnerabilities.
So like ethical hackers, but for AI.
Exactly. Find the weaknesses before someone with bad intentions does.
Makes sense. And he also emphasizes the need for more robust testing and auditing of these systems before they're released into the wild.
It's like before you release a car onto the road, you want to make sure the brakes work and the airbags are functional. You don't wait for a pileup to start thinking about safety.
Exactly. And the stakes are way higher with AI and synthetic biology.
He also stresses the need for more transparency in the development process.
So that experts can identify and address potential risks before these technologies are widely deployed.
Right, because once they're out there, it's much harder to control them.
Okay, so that's technical safety. What about this cultural shift? What needs to change within the tech industry?
He talks about the need for a culture of responsibility, one that prioritizes safety and ethics over, speed and profit.
Which is tough in a world where everyone's obsessed with disruption and being the first to market.
He uses the airline industry as an example.
The airline industry, what do they have to do with AI?
It's a sector where safety is absolutely paramount.
Right, because if a plane goes down, the consequences are catastrophic.
Exactly. And there's this culture of transparency, of open communication about failures and near misses.
So that everyone can learn from those mistakes and prevent them from happening again.
Precisely. And he believes the tech industry needs to adopt a similar mindset.
One that acknowledges the potential risks and takes proactive steps to mitigate them.
And he even argues that we need to embrace failure.
Embrace failure. Now that's a radical concept. Isn't the tech world all about celebrating success?
He means that companies and researchers should be encouraged to, openly share their mistakes.
So that others can learn from them.
Exactly. That's how we improve, by being honest about what went wrong.
Okay, I can see the logic there. But how do you convince companies, especially in the competitive tech world, to be more open about their failures?
It's a big ask, no doubt, but he thinks it's essential, given the potential consequences.
Right, the stakes are just too high to ignore the risks.
And he believes that, ultimately, companies will realize that it's in their own best interest to prioritize safety.
Because if people don't trust your technology, they won't use it.
Exactly, and that hurts the bottom line in the long run.
So it's about building trust with the public.
And that requires transparency and a willingness to acknowledge and learn from mistakes.
Okay, so we've got technical safety, a cultural shift within the tech world. What about this third prong, popular engagement?
This one's huge. Suleyman argues that we can't just leave it to the experts and policymakers to figure this all out.
Because ultimately, these technologies are going to impact all of us, right?
Exactly. And he believes the public needs to be informed and actively engaged in shaping the future of AI and synthetic biology.
Because it's not like these technologies are going to stay locked up in labs. They're going to be integrated into our lives in ways that we can't even imagine right now.
And if we don't have a say in how that happens, well, we could end up with a future that we don't want.
Okay, I get it, but how do you even begin to engage the public on something this complex and, let's be honest, kind of terrifying?
He suggests things like citizen assemblies, public forums, educational initiatives.
So basically, creating spaces where people can learn about these technologies and have their voices heard,
Exactly. Provide people with the information they need to understand what's at stake.
and then give them a chance to weigh in on how these technologies should be developed and deployed.
And he believes this kind of participatory approach is essential for building trust.
Right, because if people feel like you're being left out of the decision-making process, they're more likely to be suspicious and resistant.
Exactly. And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
Okay, so to recap, we've got these incredibly powerful technologies on the horizon, and they could lead to either utopia or dystopia, depending on how we handle them.
It's a fork in the road, and the choices we make now will determine which path we take.
And Suleyman's argument is that we need to focus on technical safety, a cultural shift within the tech world, and engaging the public in a meaningful way.
Those are the three pillars of his containment framework.
Okay, sounds good on paper, but is he actually optimistic that we can pull this off?
He acknowledges that there are no easy answers, but he does end the book on a cautiously optimistic note.
Cautiously optimistic, huh? So there's hope, but it's going to be a tough road ahead.
He points out that throughout history, humanity has faced similar challenges. Moments where technology threatened to disrupt everything.
And we've always found a way to adapt, right? To bend technology to our will, to make it work for us.
He draws a parallel to the Luddite Rebellion, the textile workers who destroyed factory machinery.
They weren't exactly fans of technological progress.
But his point is that even that disruptive period eventually led to positive outcomes, like improved working conditions and a higher standard of living.
So in the end, it's not about stopping progress, but about guiding it, making sure it benefits humanity as a whole.
Exactly. And he believes the coming wave offers incredible opportunities to, solve some of the world's most pressing problems like climate change, disease, poverty.
But we need to be wide awake to the risks
Yeah.
and actively working to mitigate them.
And that requires all of us to be engaged, informed, and willing to speak up.
Okay, I'm getting fired up here. It's like, this is our future we're talking about. We can't just sit back and let it happen to us.
That's the spirit. Suleyman's message is ultimately one of empowerment. He believes we have agency, we have a choice in how this all plays out.
Okay, I'm feeling a little less overwhelmed and a little more empowered now.
Good, because the future is not set in stone. It's a thing we create through our choices and actions.
So what can our listeners do right now to make a difference? What's the one thing you hope they take away from this deep dive?
That they have a role to play, that their voices matter, and that by engaging in this conversation, by demanding better from those in power, they can help shape a future where technology serves humanity.
That's a great message to end on.
It's not just about doom and gloom. It's about recognizing the possibilities and working together to create the future we want.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been, well, intense, but also incredibly thought-provoking.
It's been my pleasure. Now go forth and be the change you want to see in the world.
Great advice. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time. So we're facing this coming wave of AI and synthetic biology, right? Driven by these powerful forces that are, well, pretty much unstoppable.
And we've got these potential states of failure, these really scary scenarios that could unfold if we don't get this right.
Yeah, not exactly a comforting thought.
But Suleyman isn't just throwing up his hands and saying game over. He believes there's a way to navigate this, a way to harness the incredible power of these technologies while avoiding the really bad outcomes.
Okay, give me some hope here. What's the plan?
He lays out a pretty comprehensive framework for what he calls containment.
Containment, huh? So not about stopping progress altogether, but about steering it in a direction that benefits humanity.
Exactly. And he's very clear that this isn't a quick fix. It's not just about slapping on some regulations and hoping for the best.
Right, because those unstoppable incentives we talked about, they're not going away anytime soon.
Exactly. We need a more fundamental shift, a multi-pronged approach that addresses the technological, cultural, and political dimensions of this challenge.
Okay, multi-pronged approach sounds ambitious. What's the first prong?
He calls it technical safety. It's all about making sure that these technologies are, safe by design.
Safe by design, I like that, so it's not an afterthought, but built into the development process from the very beginning.
Right, and he argues that we need to invest way more in research that focuses specifically on the safety and security of these systems.
So not just making them more powerful, but also making them more secure, more resilient.
Exactly. He talks about things like red teaming, where you have teams of experts who are actively trying to break AI systems, find those vulnerabilities before someone with bad intentions does.
So kind of like ethical hackers, but for AI. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And he also emphasizes the need for way more rigorous testing and auditing of these systems before they're released into the wild.
Think of it like building a car. You wouldn't just send it out on the road without brakes, airbags, and a whole lot of testing to make sure it's safe, right?
Yeah, and the stakes are obviously much higher with AI and synthetic biology.
No doubt. And he also talks about the need for more transparency in the development process so that experts can, really scrutinize these systems, identify potential risks before they're widely deployed.
Okay, so technical safety, that's prong number one. What about this cultural shift he talks about?
Yeah, that's prong number 2, and it's a big one. He argues that we need a fundamental shift in the culture of the tech industry, one that prioritizes responsibility and ethics over, the typical move fast and break things mentality.
Move fast and break things? That's a pretty good way to sum up the Silicon Valley ethos, isn't it?
Yeah, and he thinks that needs to change, and fast.
So what does he propose?
Yeah.
What does this new, more responsible tech culture look like?
He uses the airline industry as a model.
The airline industry? Really? Seems like a bit of a jump.
But think about it, in the airline industry, safety is absolutely paramount.
Right, because if a plane goes down, well, the consequences are catastrophic.
Exactly, and there's this culture of transparency. Everyone is encouraged to report near misses, errors, anything that could compromise safety.
So that they can learn from those mistakes and prevent them from happening again.
And there's this constant drive to improve safety standards, and Suleyman believes the tech industry needs to adopt that same mindset.
So less move fast and break things, and more proceed with caution and a healthy dose of ethical consideration.
Exactly. He even uses this great phrase, embrace failure.
Embrace failure. That's not something you hear very often in the tech world, where everyone's obsessed with success.
His point is that we need to encourage companies and researchers to be more open about their mistakes, to share what went wrong, so that everyone can learn from it.
So it's not about punishing failure, but about learning from it.
Exactly. And he believes that, in the long run, this will actually lead to better, safer, more reliable technology.
Okay, I can see the logic there, but how do you convince companies, especially in such a competitive industry, to be more open about their failures?
It's tough, no doubt, but he thinks it's essential, given the potential consequences.
Right, if we're talking about technologies that could literally reshape society, we can't afford to be secretive about the risks.
And he also argues that this shift needs to start at the top, with the CEOs, founders, investors who are, really driving this technological development.
So it's not just about writing better code, it's about creating a different kind of culture.
A culture that recognizes the immense power of these technologies and the responsibility that comes with it.
Okay, I'm with you on that. But even if we get the technology right and we shift the culture in Silicon Valley, isn't there still a big piece missing? I mean, these technologies are going to impact all of us, not just the tech elite.
You're hitting on the third prong, popular engagement.
Popular engagement, so getting the public involved.
Absolutely. Suleyman is adamant that we can't just leave this to the experts and policymakers.
This isn't just a techie issue, it's a societal issue, right?
Exactly. And he believes that the public needs to be informed, engaged, and actively involved in shaping the future of these technologies.
Because ultimately, it's the public who will be most impacted by them.
And if we don't have a say in how these technologies are developed and deployed, well, we could end up with a future that we don't want.
Okay, I'm on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you even begin to engage the public on something this complex and, frankly, kind of scary?
He suggests a bunch of things. Citizen assemblies, public forums, educational initiatives, creating spaces where people can learn about these technologies, ask questions, have their voices heard.
So it's about demystifying this stuff, making it accessible to everyone.
Exactly, because the more people understand, the better equipped they'll be to participate in this crucial conversation.
Okay, so that's the three prongs of Suleyman's containment framework. Technical safety, a cultural shift in the tech industry, and popular engagement.
Sounds like a tall order.
It is, but is he actually optimistic that we can pull this off?
He acknowledges that there are no easy answers, and success is, far from guaranteed.
But he's not giving up hope.
No, he ends the book on a cautiously optimistic note.
Cautiously optimistic, huh? So there's a chance, but we've got to work for it.
He reminds us that humanity has faced massive technological disruptions before, and we've always found ways to adapt, to innovate, to steer progress in a direction that ultimately benefits us.
So it's not about stopping progress, it's about guiding it, making sure it serves humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly. And he sees the coming wave as an incredible opportunity, a chance to solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
Like climate change, disease, poverty.
But we need to be wide awake to the risks, and we
Yeah.
need to be actively working to mitigate those risks while also embracing the positive potential of these technologies.
Okay, that makes sense. But after this deep dive, I have to admit, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. It's like, I get that this stuff is important, but what can I, one person, actually do about it? It all feels so big and
I
complex.
get it. It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these massive technological forces, but Silliman's message is ultimately one of empowerment.
Empowerment, how so?
He believes that we have agency, that the choices we make today, both individually and collectively, will determine what kind of future we create.
So what can our listeners do right now to make a difference?
A lot, actually. First and foremost, stay informed. Don't bury your head in the sand. Read the coming wave. Do your own research. Stay up to date on the latest developments.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more you understand, the better equipped you'll be to participate in this conversation.
Okay, what else?
Talk to people. Have conversations with your friends, family, colleagues. Share what you're learning. Listen to different perspectives. Help raise awareness.
So start a book club, get into some heated debates at dinner parties, spread the word.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask tough questions, especially of those in power. Demand more transparency and accountability from the companies developing these technologies and the governments that are supposed to be regulating them.
So make some noise, write to our representatives, engage in online discussions, hold these tech giants accountable.
Right, because they work for us, we have a right to demand that they prioritize our safety, our well-being, our values.
Okay, I'm feeling a little less overwhelmed and a little more empowered now.
Good, because that's what Suleyman is hoping for. He wants us to feel like we have a say in this, that we're not just passive bystanders.
Because the future isn't set in stone, it's a thing we create.
Exactly, and the choices we make today will determine what kind of world we inherit tomorrow.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty powerful message to end on. It's a bit daunting, but also, like you said, empowering.
It's both, and that's the reality we're facing. We have this incredible opportunity to shape the future, but we also have a responsibility to do it wisely, ethically, and with a deep awareness of the potential risks.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. It's been, well, intense, but also incredibly thought-provoking.
It's been my pleasure. Now go forth and be the change you want to see in the world.
Great advice. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this deep dive into Mustafa Suleyman's The Coming Wave. We'll see you next time. And until then, keep those conversations going.